Today we're going to talk about AI and the impact of AI on humans, crypto, and pretty much everything that matters. And I have with me someone who's been thinking about this topic very deeply. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation today.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me, Arjun.
Arjun, big picture question. Like when you think about AI, are you excited or are you scared?
I mean, I think it's like with any extremely sufficiently advanced technology, right? It's a little bit of both. There's definitely, I mean, I think I'm net excited because I don't know about you, but I'm the kind of like part of the reason that I was interested in crypto and part of the reason that I just like technology in general is because I'm just an extremely I'm just extreme. I have an extremely low tolerance for doing dumb shit, like dumb administrative shit that's like very, very repetitive, right? And like AI can maybe get rid of all of that, which is awesome. Like imagine never having to fill out forms again, or never having to like do like personal admin again. But then you have to think about like, well, okay, but like there's a lot of people for whom that is just their job, right? So what is going to happen to those people is an open question. And so yeah, it's a bit of both, right? We with any technology, it's like we have to find the right way to like make sure we get as many of the good outcomes with as few of the bad outcomes as we can.
I mean, just based on that answer, there are so many tangents we can potentially get into, right? Like the
Yeah.
potential job loss with AI is crazy. But then at the same time, like you mentioned, the potential to change how everything works in this world is also pretty crazy. Like imagine if AI actually just solves cancer for once and for all. So like I don't know. How should one think about this entire revolution right now? Like, should people look at it as an opportunity, or should people look at it as a threat? Personally, I'm like more opportunistic by nature. Like, I'm more optimistic by nature. So I'm like trying to focus on the positive side of things, and hopefully, like I'm backing myself to figure out things for the better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I mean, okay, so like what is the point of technology? Why do we innovate as human beings? And in general, it's like reducing the amount of time we spend doing things like the base things that we need to do in order to survive, right? So like when we invented farming, it was so that we don't not every single person needs to be spending 100% of their time hunting and gathering. Instead, you can have some people that are like generating food, and then that frees up time for other people to do other things, right? And as we've gone along, technology has kind of helped us like automate more and more of the things that we would need to do, basically bring humans further and further away from like the basal things just that we need to do to survive, right? And over time we kind of like have built these like architectures of that are of like coordination around getting those basal survival needs in place, right? Supply chains and things like that to make sure that like food is appropriately piped to everyone. So that way we can really move food production further away from us and not just only have food production exist for survival, but also like get food that we want to get because that is like our preference. And this is the like really
Hmm.
incredible thing that capitalism has enabled is like the ability for choice to exist, right? For human beings beyond just like this is what we must have. And the really interesting place that we've come to now is that we have come to the point where we are creating a technology that is not just solving a specific problem, but instead it is a technology that allows us to encapsulate 100% of the human mind's problem solving ability. And that's like an inflection point, right? That's an inflection point where like all of a sudden humans don't need to do anything anymore. And that's maybe a really good thing. Like I personally think that like the kind of world that we live in right now where like we have to work to survive because we have to work as part of even if you're like it's no longer like oh I have to hunt and gather to survive, but it's like I have to
Hmm.
work in society as a whole to survive because even though my job is extremely far removed from doing what like doing like actual food production at the end of the day, there's like a trickle effect of like I do things over here, and then that leads to like other economic things happening here, that leads to other economic things happening here, and so on and so forth. That trickle effect is not like efficient at all. Like we think
Hmm.
markets are like somewhat efficient, but there's definitely a lot of inefficiencies along the way where some people extract a lot more value than others. But at the end of the day, like every single person today operates in a way where they have to do things to survive because of money. And we're going to remove that entirely. And that's going to have a lot of really interesting consequences. Like
But
it's
do you
very
think
possible.
you can actually remove that entirely, because like the whole construct of society is built in a way where like you provide someone a service or a product and that's how you get paid, right? So how do you remove something so core to human nature in general entirely?
Well, is it core to human nature, or is it just core to like society in the last like 3,000 years?
I mean,
Right.
core to how humans have operated and coordinated in this world for the last
Yeah,
what, 2 centuries.
exactly. Like I think like pre societal coordination, pre markets, pre sort of you needing to earn money to survive, like you didn't need to earn money to survive. You need to hunt and gather to survive, but you didn't need to earn money to survive, right?
Mm.
And even there, like if you were like a child, or if you were elderly, or if you were just like part of a commune of people, there were times of surplus, right? And like there were times where people weren't necessarily having to do anything to survive.
Mm.
And it's an interesting question, right? I think you're bringing up an interesting point, which is like, will this actually change or not? And that is an open question right now, right? It's like it's possible. There is a possibility right now that we enter into a world of post scarcity, which basically means like we no longer need to do things to survive. We will still want to do things. There will still, post scarcity doesn't mean post status. It doesn't mean post like stratification of society, right? Like there may still be, we'll still have certain things where like some people are doing better than others, and you may still want to work to do things because it gets you some status that you're able to like leverage to do things, right? Like not everyone will be able to afford a mansion,
Mhm.
but we could, and ideally hopefully should, move into a world where everyone can afford, food is just a public good,
Okay.
shelter is just a public good. And I really hope that that happens. I think if it doesn't happen, I think if it doesn't happen, we will probably end up like there will be people that will just end up blowing up like AI
Yeah.
data centers. So, it's a question of like at that point we're not entering into this AI future anyway.
Mhm.
So I think to an extent, like governments and companies will have to find a way to like redistribute enough wealth for people to survive. Now, what happens beyond that is an open question.
I mean, like, in that sort of a world, people who already have the capital, like they are obviously at a very big advantage, right? And the world is, of course, spread into extremes. Like the top 10% is richer than literally everything else in this world. So even if you bring everyone to a certain level, that would just kill ambition, because you're saying like, okay, there's no way anyone can earn money because there's no service. So how does one earn money and get like to the next stage on the status level, or like how does one improve in life? Like there's no purpose anymore then.
Yeah. So, I think purpose is a really important question. I think humans are going to have to do probably a lot of psychedelics to like think through like, okay, what is my life purpose if it's not just to be, a cog in the capitalist machine?
Yeah.
But I actually don't, I think like when we're talking about like human nature, I do think that there is something that is a fundamental aspect of human nature, which is status and comparison based on status, right? I do think like even if money is no longer the metric that we're using to compare people, we will still find other metrics that are used to compare people. And like there's
Mhm.
a actually I think Sam Altman wrote a really interesting blog post on this where he was talking about how like um, you know even if we enter into this like post sort of like capitalist world where money so first off, I think it's a lot of philosophers right now, a lot of like people that are looking at AI seem to think that like there's a very good chance that if we enter into this sort of world, like the stratification that exists in society right now in terms of economics will likely be frozen in place, and upward mobility, at least on the sense of like moneyness, will not exist anymore. But I think that doesn't mean that like we will not come to value other things, and those other things can be things like fame, right? How
Mhm.
like Twitter fame, for instance, even to a much, much greater degree than exists today, which is a little terrifying, right?
Mhm.
It can be things like beauty and charisma. It may be things, and this was a really interesting one that came out of the Samus blog post. It was, we may like define success as, or status as, like how well liked are we by AI.
That's fucked up.
It's really fucked up. But yeah, I do think that there will be a sense of like transition towards like, because like even now, right? Status is like, we're already entering into a world where like status and influence is like explicitly monetizable, right? If you become famous, like
Mhm.
you are able to find ways to make money around being famous.
I
That is
mean,
not a problem
humans
anymore.
will always find a game to kind of figure out who's doing better than the other, right? So we will figure out a game, but it'll be interesting to see like if it's not money, if it's not even like Instagram, Twitter, like that sort of social credibility fame, what else would people kind of like, what else would there be consensus around? Like, okay, this game is worth playing, play this for the next 100 years, right? Like, of course, nobody has the answers right now, but like it's all speculation.
Yeah. We do know that it will certainly not be one thing, which is intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, so that was going to be my next question, right? Like, if AI changes everything, like, how do we kind of define who's an intelligent person? Like, how do we define intelligence in this world? Because if you look at all of these models, right, they know more than me about literally everything. So I'm definitely not intelligent compared to AI, but like I'm maybe intelligent compared to like 90% of the world, like 90% of the humans. So how do we see intelligence anymore?
Yeah. I think like right now, the thing that human beings have over AI, right, is like we may not have like very specific localized intelligence into like specific knowledge, but we are one able to have better sort of common sense around things. So better
Hmm.
kind of like logical inference around and this is, by the way, this is something that's like absolutely disappearing, right? This is not going to last forever. And the second one I think is maybe a little bit more defensible, but not forever, which is just like taste. It's like intuition, right? It's
Hmm.
it's like the ability for not your conscious mind but your subconscious to form larger scale intuitive connections between diverse concepts that are not necessarily explicit in your conscious mind. And like that is something like that kind of gut feeling of like this is where
Yeah.
I that is something that I think is going to be maybe the last thing that gets replaced, because it is the thing that requires the highest amount of like basically density of like cognitive interactions, right? This is
Yeah.
like the highest number of like your neuron like synapses firing is associated with like larger scale intuitive processes.
These are things you cannot explain like why they happen. They just happen, and they have to
Yeah,
happen through that one person because of everything that they've done in their life, everything they've read, every experience that they've gone through, and then it just comes through them.
exactly. And like usually like your conscious mind is usually an impediment to this process, right? Like if you like actively think about what your conscious mind is thinking about at this second as you're speaking, right? And if you force yourself to think about like, well, what is the next thing it's going to think about, right? Eventually you hit the termination of that process where then you just subconscious that is feeding directly into conscious. And like that is sort of that's kind of, I mean, that is basically just like LLM text generation. And so, yeah, I think like we currently live in a world where like intelligence is valued. In fact, I would say over the course of the last like 100 years, intelligence has sort of been like the value of intelligence in society has been growing exponentially, and the value of other things like physical strength and stuff like that has been decreasing. But it's an interesting, because it's going to be a graph that goes like this, and then as soon as we hit AGI, it's just going to go where like all of a sudden being intelligent is going to be completely commoditized, right? So like
Yeah.
basically nerds are cooked. Like we are all screwed.
And so, I mean, in that sort of world, I guess things that make you more human matter more, like things like empathy. I don't know. If someone can actually understand other humans better, like he's probably higher up in society.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this is something that it's sort of this is sort of like an intuitive outcome, right? Where you're like, well, in a world where everything is automated, what's going to matter? It's going to like service industry jobs where you're interacting with a human being, and like that human being is like really just fantastic at making you feel comfortable, right? In a way that like AI just maybe can be to an extent, but is not going to entirely replicate. Like
Like
those
the
kinds of things
human
we think are
touch to
useful.
things, the
Exactly.
experiential stuff.
Yeah, the like imperfectness of that experience, right? That kind of like charisma will become very very valuable, right? And things like that.
Something like I face on a daily basis is probably when I'm tweeting, right? So if my tweet looks a little bit more like AI, like people have told me make typos so that people know that it's literally you, and and I'm like that's the most insane thing I've heard in a while. Like if I can write, my entire life I've been told to write better, right? Be perfect, like speak perfectly, write perfectly, and then now I'm being told to make mistakes so that people who cannot see me doing this task know that behind behind the screen doing this task. Like it's insane.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of wild. And this is where we are today, right? I mean, these things are going to get better. I mean, and there's interesting questions here. Like a lot of people sort of argue against this, where they're like, well, to what extent can AI models continue to improve ad nauseum? Where are we going to hit AGI, et cetera? I mean, there is a lot of research behind this.
Mhm.
Like the current transformers architecture definitely like scales way past what we believe is AGI and into ASI, and like it doesn't level off for quite a while. But also there's a lot of arguments around it, right? I would say like look, like if we were to look even a few years ago at the models that exist today, we would say, yeah, that's AGI. Right? We'd be
Mhm.
like, yeah, that's it's basically AGI, right? And so
Yeah.
I think it's like we've kind of, now that we're kind of at this point, we're having a hard time nailing down like what is AGI exactly.
Mhm.
But even if we were to stop here today, right? Even if we just if there was no further model innovation, we would still enter into a completely different world. Right? Maybe
Mhm.
we don't automate everything, but we automate enough. We have enough sort of. I mean, like I don't know if you there was a tweet that there's like a news article and a tweet around it that came out recently, which was like Gen Zers are working like 8 jobs, like 6 jobs on average, and like in parallel, and earning like 900K a year. And
There
this
was
is like a
a
thing that's happening.
Soham Parekh thing that happened. There was this one
Yeah,
guy who got 15 jobs or something.
yeah, and this is apparently a thing that like a lot more people are doing, where like they're working like senior level jobs, which involve like a lot of like delegation and a lot of that where like a lot of it can be automated with AI, and then they're not taking like calls, and they're just working like 6 jobs in parallel. And technically, it's like not illegal or anything to do that. Obviously, like they would get fired if everybody knew, but like yeah, they're earning like 900K a year doing that. And this is like I've tweeted about this before, where like people are like, oh well, AI is not going to like automate my job, and I'm like, you're people I think mistakenly believe that AI is your competition, but it's
Mhm.
not. Like AI is a tool. Your competition is not AI models.
Someone
It's
with
AI
AI.
augmented humans. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like the superhuman ability for someone who actually knows how to use this stuff to like really just knock you out of the park, right?
I mean, so in your experience, has anything like that happened where you felt like, okay, now I can just be as productive as five other people in this company that I would have had to hire earlier?
Yeah, I mean, we've basically stopped hiring at Everclear. We're actually
Okay.
reducing the size of the team somewhat, and like not through letting people go or whatever, but just like in general, like we're finding that there are like less people needed on day-to-day operations. And even though we've
Mhm.
grown so much, like we are not going to really hire anymore, because there's no point. Like where
Mhm.
the rate at which AI is becoming more effective at automating processes in the organization is faster than the rate at which we need greater headcount.
Mhm.
And I know of a bunch of other orgs that are in this position. I think any org that has hired hundreds of people is like probably like, oh fuck, what do we do now? Bullish small organizations at this point. And yeah, I mean, I think even for me personally, like writing code, right? I've been writing code since I was pretty young, but I was never like a
Mhm.
fantastic software developer from like a getting like detail orientation perspective, because I'm just not very detail oriented, right? Like I was
Mhm.
never the person that was like, oh, I'm going to write code that is like perfectly unit tested. I was the person that was like, okay, I know how to like design these systems. I know how to put like I know how this thing should look and work, and I know what pieces need to go into it, and I know how it needs to perform. And now like software development AI is at the point where like you know, obviously vibe coding is bad, but
Yeah.
vibe coding is bad because people are like, oh, build me XYZ app, and then they expect the AI model to build everything, right? That's not going to work. That doesn't make any sense. But if you're a person like me, where like, for example, I've been building something with Python recently, pretty intensive application, not like a small project. I don't know Python at all. The last time I wrote an application in Python was like 2008, where I built like an address book, just to like do something for like a class. And like I started building with Python largely just using like human language. And I'm basically going like reviewing the code, reviewing, the logic and things like that as I go. But I'm largely all of the code is technically written by the LLM. However, what
Mhm.
I'm doing is like defining explicitly, okay, these are the different building blocks. This is the function. This is like the database entity, et cetera, et cetera. So like I'm doing all of the thinking behind the software engineering. I'm just not writing the actual code
Mhm.
automatically. I've done this before in the past with Everclear, for instance, or with Connects, for instance, in like 2020 or so. Like we built a new version of the protocol at the time using state channels, and like I was able to do this piece of like, okay, I know how all these different functions fit together. I know how all these pieces fit together. I know how the protocol should work, and I know the test vectors, but I don't have the capacity and the ability, the patience, frankly, to write like the actual module, right? The actual code. And so like that was written by like my co-founders. But now like yeah, it's like a fully working product, right?
Mhm.
And like the level of abstraction that you need to be at in order to make sure you produce a good output just continually rises over time. So over time, like, yes, there will be a threshold where you can just be like, build me this thing, and it just builds you the whole thing. But like, if you are a person that's like in this top kind of category of like, I understand the higher levels of abstraction, I understand how it all needs to fit together, that like that's all you really need to know right now, and the amount you need to know there decreases with time.
I mean, it makes sense, and it's there's also the aspect of agency here. Like you're someone who's willing to go deeper into like figuring things out and making things work. So for someone like you, there are of course AI tools there, and then you can like go step by step. Like I was reading some article the other day, and there are six AI coding softwares, and you can basically use one for like building a proof of concept, and then if you go into like more detailed stuff with if you're scaling the application, go to like Claude or something. So there are basically tools for everything that you want to do today. If you're like someone who can help themselves find those tools and like think about these things. But I feel like we're underestimating human laziness, which is one of the biggest factors in this world, right? Like the access to AI is impacting people's ability to think. And if you're not someone who has been trained to think from first principles, you're probably too lazy and you just go to AI and say, hey, write me this thing, or like help me draw this like new diagram, or help me code this. And then AI doesn't work. Neither do you upscale, or like neither does your ability to think kind of increases. So how do we draw the line between AI saving you time versus you using AI to outsource thinking altogether?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, it's like you wanna you so like you do want to outsource thinking, and I want to be clear, like, I'm an extremely lazy person. Like, I don't
Nice.
like doing. I don't. I started this whole conversation with like, I really just don't like doing detail-oriented admin work stuff. Like, you give me forms to fill, and I just won't do it. Like, I will. It will take me like probably 3 to 4 times longer than anyone else to do any basic admin task, just like basic admin tasks that anyone can do, right?
But this is slightly different. Like we're all lazy about certain things and then like hyper obsessed about things that we really care about. So this is very
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even for things that I care about, like I procrastinate on those kinds of things, right? And so I
Okay.
think there's like a narrative for people where they're like, oh, well, I'm just lazy, and I think that narrative itself can be kind of destructive. Where you're people like there's people have a lot of internal narratives around stuff, and this is something that I encountered a lot when first starting with startups, like when I was like, 21, 22 years old, where like
Mhm.
a lot of people are like, well, like I need to learn how to do that. Like that's a thing that requires like skills and requires education, requires like, I need to know how to do these things in order to do them. You don't need to know how to do things in order to do them. Like you could just do things and you could just figure it out. Like, and it's not even hard. Like it's like when you're building something and like you run into a problem, it's like a lot of people will be like, well, I ran into this problem, and so I don't know how to like, I just don't know what this problem is. And in the past, it was like, yeah, you had to go into Google and like really search for like, and like deeply try it. And now it's like you just go to ChatGPT and you're like, hey, I ran into this problem. What does this problem mean?
Yeah.
Explain this concept to me. It's just about asking questions, right? You just ask lots and lots and lots of questions. And over time, you build an understanding. I think the problem today is fundamentally stems from the way that like education has worked, which is like we have historically with education always focused on like little detail oriented specificity things. And then as you get further along in your education, like as you go to like university and then grad school and PhDs, like you move up in levels of abstraction. So like a good example of this is math. With math, or actually physics is a better example because I studied physics and so I know it quite well.
Mhm.
With physics, right? Like when you're in schools, you learn like basic kinetics, which is like when I push a ball down a hill, like what happens, how does it roll, etc.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, you get into university, you're basically taught like, well, all of those things that you learned in school, they're all just wrong. Like they're just wrong. We just made up that math. It doesn't really exist. It was like a near field approximation, and like that was just what like Newton used. And like in practice, none of this stuff is correct. Here is a better
Mhm.
approximation, and you learn this like new approximation, which is like mechanics, and then you learn, and then like you kind of keep moving up this like layers of abstraction until you get to like much higher levels of abstraction, right? And like eventually you get to higher levels of abstraction around things like, okay, well, why do like how do we map out larger scale forces and effects in the universe? Well, what we do in mathematics, the right way to do it in mathematics is to use differential geometry, which is like the most abstract version of geometry where It's geometry that is invariant of the space that you are in.
Mm-hmm.
So like, for example, imagine you're like, you're on a flat plane that is Euclidean geometry. And so you just use normal geometry there. But, differential geometry defines equations where like the same equation will be held true regardless of whether you're on a flat plane or you're in like a curved thing or you're in like a rhomboid, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We treat these higher level abstractions, differential geometry, ontology, epistemology, like all of these, like these topics that you just really don't learn about. We treat them as like these extremely complex topics that you only learn when you're in sufficiently advanced classes in university. And I find that to be really fucking stupid because like basically what those classes are teaching you is like in this entire field, what do things look like? Right? In
Mm-hmm.
epistemology, it's like in the field of knowledge, how do we learn things in general? And instead of teaching that like in lower level classes, when you're actually trying to learn things, you learn this at the end of learning everything. It's like, okay, here's the broader pattern of how you learn things. By the way,
Yeah.
this would have been really useful when you were in the process of learning things. And I think what's happening with AI is like AI is now raising the bar for all of the lower level stuff, right? In the same way that like calculators removed long division, and now there's just no point in doing long division, like AI is raising the bar for a lot of the like lower level cognitive tasks. So like it's like, why bother learning? Frankly, like you could still learn it if you want, but like there's just
Yeah.
not going to be much of a point. Why bother learning all these like lower level skills? Learn the higher level abstractions, because if you learn those things, right, if you learn system design and system architecture, that is a valuable skill right now, right? If you learn system architecture right now, instead of learning like how to write Python code, just learn how to create like software modules and how to test them and like how should they fit
Mm-hmm.
together, right? If you just learn
Yeah.
that skill, you can write code in any language today.
I mean, so
Well,
so
most languages.
okay. So I agree with this statement completely, right? But those two statements are also very counterintuitive because if I'm 21 today and I've been told to do an assignment, I'm gonna run towards the easiest solution, which is outsource my thinking to AI. But at the same time, you're also telling me to learn how to think. If I'm outsourcing my thinking, how am I supposed to learn how to think? Who's going to teach me how to think?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm saying. This is like the giant failure of schools in that like schools are not teaching you how to think. They're teaching you to do things. And now we have a way to outsource doing things. So now schools
Mhm.
don't teach you anything. In fact, this is, I've said this before and like I feel extremely strongly about this now. I don't think that there's any point in going to university. Like I just
Yeah, I
don't
mean,
anymore at all. Like
I've just done my undergrad, and honestly, like, I cannot get myself to do like a higher education because I'm like, I'm literally doing much more. I'm literally learning much more than anybody I've seen go to school. Like, maybe they need a format, but I don't need a format because I can give myself tasks and like educate myself. So, what's the
yeah.
point?
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about just like forming the right mental structures, right? And I think a lot
Yeah.
of this notion of like, oh, well, certain people are good at that versus others. It's like, no, like everyone forms their own mental structures. Like the notion that like school needs to, that there's a defined, like, this is the right answer and I need to put the right answer into your brain is like wrong, right? You need to come to that yourself. But like the way you do that is just by like observing a bunch of different things in real life. It's not by like
Mhm.
writing a bunch of papers.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, so if you were to give advice to like a 16-year-old or a 21-year-old who are at like their basic mental formation stages of their life, like what would you tell them? Because I feel like, so I have a younger sister who's 10 years younger to me, so there is absolutely no way I can give her this much context, right? Like AI is going to do this, schools are fucked, so you should listen to me and like maybe start trying to think for yourself. So what would be your approach to like trying to make someone, okay, maybe not 16 but 21, who's just out of college, trying to make them sit down and say, hey, like, things have changed, you really need to think for yourself now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be harsh advice, but basically, one, the notion that there is a path that you can follow in life at all, that there's a predefined path of any form, is a fucking lie. It just is.
Mhm.
And it always has been, right? Like I think our generation, I think, was told that like, okay, if you go to college and if you study XYZ things like computer science or engineering, whatever, right?
Yeah.
You'll come out, you'll get a job, and then you'll get promoted in your job, and you get promoted more in your job, then you'll buy a house, you get kids, whatever. That is just a lie. Like that's just not how life works at all, and it never has. And like even in the generation before us, right? Like that was not really true. Like they kind of winged it, and like the ones who did college got out ahead. But at the time, college was a non-consensus view, right? Any
Yeah.
form of consensus view is just going to be wrong, like for like getting ahead in life, like just by definition. Two, optimize for learning, right? Like just try things. Like if you're young, you have basically infinite capacity to take risks, right? Like yes, you need to, like obviously you could be in a financial situation where you need to take care of yourself, but like you have infinite capacity to take risks. Just take risks, try things. Doing hard things is way better as a way to grow than to do easy things and improve your resume. Because at the end of the day, your resume is another one of those things which actually doesn't matter at all. It just doesn't matter at all. It's a huge lie everybody has told you. And then
Yeah.
three, use AI as much as you possibly can. It's just, it is like the more, it is a tool where the more effective you get at using it, the more likely you are to be able to do really, really interesting things. And if you are a person that's like not paying attention to it, the sad reality is you will get outcompeted by people that are.
I mean, I feel like when things are going well, nobody's going to listen to this advice. But I feel like it'll take some sort of big event that fucks up everything that we know about this world to actually make people go back to the drawing board and say, okay, let's start fresh. Like, let's start from scratch. And this is how we're going to build for the new reality that we find ourselves in, which is just such a weird state to live in because you're like, half of the not even half, like 10% of the population probably sees where this is going. 90% doesn't see it. Half of them don't even care. So like there's such a big divide right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like we just are not, this is everywhere, right? This is across all industries. Like I think for example in finance, right? People are still sort of seeing finance as this thing where like there's value there, blah blah blah. Like finance is going to be entirely automated.
Mhm.
We're not, the notion that human beings need to manually participate in markets to trade stuff is so stupid. It's just so stupid. Like if you are a person that is trading assets, what are you actually doing? You are basically performing a function that it is a valuable function, which is why it generates profit. But you're effectively performing a market regulating function.
Mhm.
That market regulating function exists because markets today are inefficient vehicles to express value. And they're inefficient vehicles because decision making is not automated and because information is asymmetric. And both of those things are going to get fixed by LLMs, right? And there is an opportunity there. Like if you are today, for example, building agents that are betting on Polymarket, like you can make a ton of money for sure. Like it's very
Mhm.
easy, right? All you have to do is just like build an agent that's just like doing deep research or scanning the internet and you will find ways to scale. But the notion that humans need to do that is just like cooked, right? There's no reason why humans could ever outperform.
I mean, honestly, my thesis is that we will probably ban AI from participating in markets because, like, if you look at the chess world, for example, we've already built the tech that is smarter than humans 20 years ago, but we don't let the AI or like the chess computers compete against humans because that is sport, right? Like you want a human versus a human because there's emotions involved, there's like time constraints involved, there's preparation involved. So I feel like society will move towards those type of experiences where even though the AI can probably perform better, but that is not entertaining. Like I don't want to see one computer against another. Like I want to see Arjun against Arjun playing chess. Like who's gonna fuck up first? Who's gonna sacrifice their queen first? Right. So even in trading, I feel like if the emotional element is gone, there are no inefficiencies in the market. So what are you trading?
Well, I mean, that's the open question, right? So like I do think like look, I mean, the fundamental difference there is like one is a sport for entertainment and then
Yeah,
the other
for
is
sure.
like
For
basically a
sure.
core function of like how a market is functioning, right? And so and like I think like this is maybe a reason why like moving markets on chain is really important because like
Mhm.
having these markets be fundamentally global and open means like you can have them be perfectly efficient. And I think like how everyone's always like true communism hasn't ever been tried. True capitalism has also never been tried. True capitalism with like perfectly efficient markets is going to be extremely interesting. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to accelerate towards a bunch of outcomes with markets and with just like resource allocation that actually approach something that looks like communism very quickly. Because like if you have extremely extremely efficient markets, right, like who actually has an advantage anymore? you
Mhm.
know who can, like, Wall Street just doesn't exist anymore. Like the notion of like institutional capital just doesn't exist anymore, right? Because like sure, there's going to be some people that could like have larger amounts of money that can move markets, but like they're never going to have information asymmetrically to act on that like other people don't already have. And so you're just going to wash out all of these like giant traders or these giant firms completely with just like tons and tons of like retail money that is just it's basically just like Wall Street bets, like like short squeezing all over again.
Yeah. Wait, have you seen the markets on hyperliquid? Like there was some trader, James Wynn, like he had a big short on Bitcoin. And because it was public, once a trade of that size is public, the entire market is basically against you because like people want to see you fail. So he
Yeah.
got liquidated multiple times and then he lost I don't know how many millions because the market is public. Everybody literally knows your liquidation price. And you're technically like betting against the market doing well, which is again like counterintuitive for people. So they want to see you fail. And he did fail multiple times.
Yeah. And we need to make sure, like, so actually I posted about this recently about how like with intent markets, for instance, we need to make sure that these markets are designed in a way such that we avoid, like, these things are going to become hyper efficient. We need to make sure that all of these markets are designed in a way that doesn't just like result in an outcome where like loss leadership is like the winning strategy for everything, because will in theory end up in monopolies again. Though in practice, if they're like fair on-chain markets, like who knows, right? This just never existed before. And yeah, I mean, I think, but like if we kind of take that into consideration, right? These things will level out. Like the alpha and these things will go away, and you'll have basically like what exists with staking, right? So staking is a great example of like a mature market where like the market design is intrinsically fair and decentralizing. There is a benefit to being a bigger staker, but there's also a trade-off in that like you don't, like, no individual staker wants to own above a certain percentage of the staking, like the total stakeable asset, right? Because if they do, they're like technically lowering the value of the underlying platform. And so there's this optimization function that you run where you're like, okay, I need to be big enough that I'm generating a lot of revenue, but I'm not so big that I'm actually reducing the value of ETH itself, because over 50% of it is owned by one entity, right? And I think that like this is a really interesting economic dynamic equilibrium where like my expectation is like most markets will level off, especially as they become more agentic, because like the agentic actors are going to be hyper rational, and like the hyper rationality, like it or not, hyper rationality does actually win longer term for all market actions, right? For any kind of like market performance. And so, like I expect that the ones that like these automated systems are just going to do a lot better than any human ever could, and that most of this will be automated in the future.
I mean, so we've started talking about AI and crypto, right? Like, what did you make of the AI agent meta in Q4 last year? Like, of course, there was a lot of investment. There were a lot of scams. There were a lot of meme coins. But I want to get your opinion on like how did you see that sort of sector in crypto? Because there was just so much activity happening, and there were just so many like money making opportunities, but I didn't see any proper innovation, which is what I expected. Like I had been reading about AI and crypto since 2023, and then like I started reading about BitTensor and all like Render, all of those projects because those were like the legit projects at that time. So I felt at some point we will definitely see this movement, like the AI agents on chain. But I never expected what happened. But I want to get your take on like, does this make sense, or was this just a cash grab and we're done with it?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say like unfortunately the majority of AI x crypto stuff right now is just trash. And that's not to say that like AI is trash or that AI x crypto is trash. It's not. There is actually a lot of really extremely important things that will get created there, and we can talk about that in a minute. But like I think this so like first off, agent platforms are super important. I think they can solve real problems for sure. I think that the application of them right now within crypto, especially at that time, was just like really, really terrible. And it was just because we were in like meme coin era where like people were like, oh, way for this to be something that's useful is to build a platform that like generates a meme coin and then like tweets, right? Like those are the two, which is just like classic crypto being so incredibly incestuous. The like meme of like the outlet that is plugged into itself. It's basic, right? And like I think the fundamental problem with where AI x crypto is today is that a lot of people are basically, there's like three ways in which AI and crypto overlap. There is using AI to solve problems in crypto. So this is things like using AI to like massively improve like how DAOs work, using AI to get like much better analytics around like what's happening on chain and like use that to drive like better trading, whatever, right? Using AI to like demystify how like organizations are, like those kinds of things, right? Then there is building things that are like intrinsically just like basically just like automating a bunch of existing processes in crypto using AI models. And like that to me feels like the most kind of not useful thing. And like this is where all the agent platforms are, where I'm like there isn't something intrinsically there that's like solving a problem, and it doesn't necessarily have PMF. I think the notion that you can allow people to like use agents to trade and manage their finances is great, but I think like the technology is not super there yet, right? Like AI agents are not necessarily that reliable yet. But even beyond that, like I think like it's just like the like portfolio management thing has just been tried so many times, and it's not super effective. Like what you should do is kind of what I talked about earlier, which is like build agents that are like trading in specific ways on specific venues to try to scalp and arbitrage like on Polymarket or in basically places where there are less mature markets, right? And then the third category, and I think this is maybe the most interesting category and probably the most valuable category, is using crypto to solve AI problems. Honestly, no one really is doing right now, right? If you look at like BitTensor and a lot of the other projects that are out there, what they're doing is they've effectively, all of those projects have built markets to get people to build AI things, and like basically markets to incentivize certain actions around AI in crypto, like,
Like shared
incentivize training or
intelligence in
whatever.
a way.
Yeah, but they're just markets, right? Like, and the question here is like, there's no point in. I mean, like obviously, like intents, right, is a great example of this. Where it's like, would you, if you built an intent market for somebody that nobody actually wanted to, nobody really wanted to do any like that thing, like would anybody participate in that intent market? No. Like just because something is an intent market doesn't mean that it is intrinsically valuable. Like you can, instead of having a market like an RFQ for cross-chain intents, you built an RFQ for like buying NFTs, right? Like there, I mean, that is a thing that's supported, and like it is a thing that is like, like people do, but it's not intrinsically valuable enough that people, there's like tons of people that are like, yes, this is solving a real problem. And I think that's kind of unfortunately where a lot of those projects are at the moment, where like they're struggling. It's a great idea, but like if your plan for winning involves getting a bunch of other people to come to your ecosystem and do the hard work of actually figuring out how to solve all of the problems, then you're not going to win. Like there's never going to be other people that are more incentivized to solve your problems than you are,
Makes sense.
fundamentally.
I mean, before we move on to like how crypto can solve like some of AI problems, I actually want to get your take on like, do you think there will be a future where on-chain transactions will be dominated by AI agents? Because that's a thesis that I hear a lot of times.
Yes, I mean, I don't think humans will interact with finance at all. Like I think the future of finance is like I have my money in an account or a wallet, and I'm just like invest this most optimally, and then it's like, because like why would I as a human being, regardless of my level of understanding of crypto, like I deeply understand crypto, but even then as a human being, why would I be the right person to be like to look at a bunch of different protocols and be like, this thing is giving a slightly better rate, but it's less safe. And it's like for example, if you
Yeah.
look at like all of the like yield projects out there, right? Go to Royco, for instance, right? Like Royco is letting people enter into positions. I really love, by the way, I really love Jay, and I really like the team, and I like what they're doing. But the notion that you need to look at a bulletin board of all of these different yield sources and then like, like what the yield looks like and their like safety
Mm.
rating, that's insane. Like that's not a thing that humans want to do. Like what should happen is I should have money in a wallet, and I should just tell that wallet like, okay, just invest this into me, and like based on XYZ risk preferences, and that's it, right? There shouldn't be anything more than that. And I think even for like larger scale institutional capital, we're going to approach the same thing, where it's like, to what extent, like what are the like AI models will eclipse quants. There are no quants that are going to be smarter than AI models. There just aren't. Like already, there's
Yeah.
probably already like 95% like eclipsing of like skill sets and
Mm.
intellect, right? So like then it's a question of like, well, if you can have an agent that is just beating every quant fund, it's just way cheaper to not hire the quant and just have the agent do
Yeah.
it.
Unless there's like some sort of info arbitrage. But if that's
Exactly.
not the case, then I feel like there's a level playing field. Like, of course, the AI is smarter.
Exactly. If there's info arbitrage, it will be on Polymarket or a prediction market. right? And that's going to be where the money gets made on it.
So in the age of AI, like how right now we talk about like sex dex arbitrage. In the age of AI, maybe we talk about like poly market and dex market arbitrage.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think finance is going to go the same way as software engineering pretty quickly, where it's like, there's going to be like initially some higher threshold of people that are like safe because they have like a higher skill set that other people don't. And then, but over time, that's going to shrink. And eventually it's going to get to the point where it's like effectively zero, right? Like effectively
Hmm.
anyone can do finance as well as BlackRock.
So the takes about like how if you're trying to prepare yourself for the age of AI, the only two things that you should be focusing on are making enough a lot of money and also building like social credibility. Like that is right then.
Yeah. Yeah. Make money, like use AI right now, educate yourself on how to use AI. Use AI to, I mean, if you want to be, one of those Gen Z people, use AI to like do 6 jobs and like earn 100K from each of them or whatever. I mean, ideally don't, but like use AI to like amplify your output, right? Like you
Yeah.
can do that right now. And for the next like honestly probably 3 maybe 5 years, like do that and earn money, and then we'll see what happens. Whether you'll still be able to, whether anyone will be able to do that anymore is an open question.
Yeah. So prepare for the great reset by earning enough money and then also like bumping up your social media followers. And the AI slop content will probably not help you bump up any
No, it
of
won't.
those numbers.
Yeah, be an authentic person, because like that the value of authenticity is like going up exponentially. The more you are a real person that has real opinions that are like imperfect and like shitty, and the more like if all look like the sad part is like the fucking like threaders are getting so much engagement right now that everyone's like, oh well, yeah, I could just do that. But like the reality is if you're a real person, you're gonna get way more high quality followers, and that's what matters, right?
Another alpha point then is the smart followers on Kaito or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's like there was this really interesting thing that I saw recently, which is like if you technically don't need, if you have two options, right? Imagine you have 1,000 followers, but each and every one of those followers is a diehard follower. That's like, you know what? I believe in what you're doing so much that I'm willing to spend like $10 a month to just listen to you.
Yeah.
And then imagine you have 1,000 followers that are like that, or you have like 10 million followers who are just people that listen to you. The first category is way more valuable than the second category, because the first category
100%.
is infinite runway.
That's one of the hardest things, right? Like if someone will actually buy something from you, that's the highest EV thing possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the reason, by the way, why like so many examples of like celebrity products, like celebrities making like a perfume line or whatever, it fails because they have like a ton of people know who they are, but not
Yeah.
enough people care to actually pay for their thing.
Okay. There are so many thoughts in my head right now. But let's go to the part where like crypto can help AI, because I feel like we were talking about this yesterday, and I feel like that's one of the most interesting things I've heard in a long time, and nobody's talking about this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess like it's more physics stuff, right? Do you think people will know the term future Litecoin, or is that something to explain? So
I
there's a
honestly
set of
don't know.
possibilities. There's a set of possibilities that exist in the future. Right? There's like a range of different things that could be accomplished within the realm of physical possibility, and that is our future Litecoin. That is basically like all the things that we can accomplish that don't violate the speed of light. And then within that future Litecoin, there are some outcomes that are like more possible versus others. And like in general, like we are barreling towards a certain set of outcomes. I mean, obviously there's a tail risk that like a meteor crashes into the earth tomorrow and we all die, right? But we're barreling towards certain outcomes right now that are like we are barreling towards a certain set of outcomes right now. And one thing that is really interesting about where we are in the timeline of humanity is that our ability to change the domain of which outcome we end up at this time specifically is much greater than it ever has been in the past. And there's a bunch of reasons for this. One is that the level of change that is happening in human society is accelerating, which is us approaching a singularity, right? I don't really think there's like a singularity in the way that like in like a mathematical sense, but we are approaching a position where like the rate of change for human beings is accelerating, and it will take some time to level up.
Hmm.
And I think that in addition to that, the ability, the like level of agency that any individual human can have as a result of AI is also accelerating. And the our ability to innovate and discover things is also accelerating. And so, for the first time in a very long time in human history, we have like there's a certain set of paths that are available in front of us, but the range of what those paths are is quite varied. We actually have the ability, like one or two small things that exist today, if they're kind of changed or if we discover them slightly different order, can really, really change. Like they'll trickle over to having very, very different effects and very, very different outcomes in like 5 years. A way to think about this is like if you've ever played the game Civilization or really any video game that has a tech tree, right? You think about like tech trees, where it's like tech trees are like you have to unlock like writing before you can unlock the printing press and before you can unlock like whatever like espionage or whatever, right? And right now we are in a place where there's a bunch of things that we are unlocking associated with AI, but there's also a bunch of other technologies that we have unlocked and just have not yet scaled or are on the verge of unlocking. Some of them good and some of them bad. And no one in the world right now has a cohesive view. And I would actually love to do this at some point. I would love to like sit down and map out these technologies. But no one right now has a cohesive view of what all of these technologies are that are just like n plus one ahead of us at the moment and what impact they will have on a future world with AI. And each of these technologies, if discovered in a slightly different order and scaled in a slightly different order, can really, really change the way that, like, change the outcome for AI. So here's a really good example. Imagine today we discover brain-computer interfacing. Right? We have the ability to effectively, like, to a very, very high degree of density, interface our thoughts with a computer. That could potentially solve the alignment problem. With AI, the alignment problem is like, well, we don't like there is a risk that if AI is not aligned with humanity, then someone may ask it to do, like to do XYZ, and in the process of doing XYZ, it may actually cause harm to humans. So like the quintessential example of this is like paperclip optimization, where you tell an AI model like build me the best possible paperclip factory, and in order to do that, it kills all humans and turns the entire planet into a paperclip factory, right? And so to avoid that kind of outcome, like all of the large labs, all of the foundational models do AI safety and like alignment training, where these models are kind of taught to be helpful, harmless, and honest. And that works to like varying degrees, right? And ultimately, we don't ever really know entirely if they're going to be honest, which is a little scary. But if we have brain-computer interfacing, right, we can know that. We can effectively read AI minds, right? We have basically at that point an AI lie detector that is like fundamentally uncheatable. And at that point, we solved alignment. We then know for sure that we are not going to end up in a world where AI accidentally kills us because superintelligence just is malicious, right? So that's a great example of like in this tech tree, if we optimize for certain innovations right now, you're just much more likely to be able to steer ourselves away from dystopian outcomes towards outcomes that are less dystopian or ideally more utopian, to whatever extent you choose to define that term. And I think that there is a bunch of things, particularly related to crypto and related to things that we do in this industry, that are in that list. Those things are blockchains themselves. I think like blockchains allow us to create and codify rules for any kind of like structure, any kind of coordination vehicle that are fundamentally uncheatable. And if they're fundamentally uncheatable by a large enough proportion of humans, then they could, in theory, if they're widely adopted enough, they could, in theory, be fundamentally uncheatable by superintelligence. So that could provide basically like a harness around superintelligence to an extent, right? And the types of things that you build on blockchains are like how you can do that. So, for example, markets that are untamperable and are markets that are fundamentally resistant to superintelligence, right? Otherwise, like what could happen is OpenAI or whoever controls, like if you don't have markets that are untamperable, OpenAI or whoever controls superintelligence or one of many superintelligences, right? Like Grok could just decide, okay, I'm going to break how the New York Stock Exchange works to enrich myself and fuck everyone over. Like that is a thing that is possible. I think there's other things there too. I think the other ones that are on my list are zero knowledge proofs. I think the ability to verify things is going to be extremely important in the age of AI for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the technology around privacy, so right now TEEs and eventually fully homomorphic encryption that is really performant. If we are able to accomplish that, that means we can actually live in a world with AI that has privacy. So we don't live in a world where AI models know every single possible thing about us, but instead we live in a world where we actually remain individual and not just part of a hive mind.
So privacy to you more is like data protection then.
I think taken to its extreme, it's quite literally individuality. It's the ability to, it
If
is
you
a combination of sovereignty, right? It's a combination of like, am I even able to have individual thoughts and like actions and notions without accidentally alerting like Big Brother?
Mhm.
And it is right because at the end of the day, like if like one company, so it's like imagine like a hyper chat GPTification world where like OpenAI is just embedded into like everything. It's embedded into
Yeah.
every single device. It's embedded into every, you know, like this is not like an unreasonable outcome, right? This is an outcome that is very possible at this stage. We have like OpenAI's models are embedded into everything around us. Well, like you can't say things aloud without them knowing.
And then they're like, okay, this breaks the rule. Like you can't say this or you can't do
Exactly.
this.
And like there are already AI models, like Grok already, like so many of the AI models already like attempt to report you to the authorities if you say or think something that is wrong. That is already a problem. So like imagine how much of a problem that becomes, right?
That is very unfair because Grok can just say shit and get away with it.
Yeah, right. It's just and that's the thing is like then the model providers are the ones that define the rule sets of like what is and isn't okay. And like law enforcement is effectively just like AI enforcement, which is effectively just like the AI models deciding what is legal.
I was going to say like there's another geopolitical angle here because like all of the AI development today is happening either in the US or China. Like
Well, France is actually doing
builds
really well.
okay, I didn't know that. Like
Yeah.
all of the news or all of the companies that I know of are either in like the US or China. So it just seems like it is super important to see who actually cracks the code for super intelligence. Like even in the geopolitical race, like it has a lot of impact.
And I think this is actually this is a problem that is solvable with markets built on blockchains, right? Like if you have open and fair markets for agentic workflows, if you have you basically find ways to like decentralize some of the moats that AI models have, and there's some interesting things that I've been thinking about and working on there. But if you have ways to decentralize some of the moats that AI models have, or at least the model providers have, you can create market structures where now there is competition on these models forever, right? And like, you know, like, yes, the foundational model providers like OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and maybe soon Meta, let's see, we know that they are, you know, they're basically like a step ahead in terms of research at the moment. And so they're
Yeah.
the bleeding edge models are performing at a level that is beyond like what the open source models are performing at. But the open source models are catching up, right? Like open source AI is actually quite fucking good. Like I mean, I was talking about France. Like Mistral is a company in France that is building like open source AI, and their models are fantastic. They have built models that perform at the same level as like a lot of the OpenAI models. They just released like a speech to text model that beats Whisper, like Whisper Large, and it's a much smaller model. It's way cheaper, and it's fully open source. And like there is the capacity to like compete with these large providers on models such that the large providers don't capture 100% of the economy. Like maybe they have super intelligence, but they don't capture 100% of the economy, right? And but that doesn't happen unless competition stays open. Like if we
Mhm.
lock into an outcome where like users are locked into a certain platform, but like we need XERC20 for AI. If users
Exactly.
lock into a certain if users lock into a specific platform or something like that, like we will never be able to break that, right? Like how do you divest from an AI application or platform that is integrated so deeply into your life that is like it's listening to every single conversation and it has like
Yeah.
you know like terabytes worth of data on you.
I mean, this is never going to stop because, like, if you look at OpenAI and if you listen to Sam Altman, like, he wants to build a phone now. So, at some point, our Apple devices will be replaced by OpenAI devices because they just have a different view towards building like an AI first mobile phone. So, I feel like what Apple did for humans with like smartphones where you can like just touch things, use your fingers as a mouse. There might be a different form factor for mobile phones in general that OpenAI might be able to crack. So you never know.
Yeah, on devices is a really crazy thing, right? It's like if it's
Yeah.
built, it's like the I think the problem with for a lot of these like model providers is like, well, you're always going to get beaten by somebody that is like higher up in the value chain. So like, what is the highest up in the value chain you could go? Is basically like directly baked into hardware, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
it's in the chipset. There's no way to get, there's like no way to kind of get around that. If you own the whole stack, if you completely verticalize and you take like the Apple approach where like everything is built in house, then there's no way for somebody to short circuit you. And like
Mhm.
in theory, that's a really defensible position. I think again, like in practice, there are other things that maybe we can do to try to like decentralize that. I do think finding ways to decentralize hardware is maybe one of the biggest open questions at this point. And it's been a question in crypto for a while, like for a long
Mhm.
while, which is like, well, like, yeah, maybe like we'll build. Look, by the way, these are not new questions in crypto. Like when we were talking about like decentralization back in like 2016, 2017, there was always this like question of like, well, like you can't really maximally decentralize because at the end of the day, right, like there's always somebody that can be a man in the middle, quote unquote. Someone can build a browser that just like Google Chrome, for example, could get attacked or could push an update where it is like acting as a man in the middle and like it has access to your private keys because of that, right?
Mhm.
And there is no answer to that. And similarly, if you're using your phone, like someone could build something into Apple firmware that now has access to your keys. And like how do you beat that? Well, in 2016, a bunch of people did ICOs to build phones. I'm still waiting for
Yeah.
those to come out.
Shit.
Exactly. But now I think it's actually kind of happening with AI where people are like, yeah, actually, like this is the reason to do it, right? Like if you just own the full stack from the ground up, you can build it in a way where it's like entirely walled garden.
Mhm.
And we'll kind of have to see what happens with that.
I mean, honestly, like on a personal level, I've been questioning a lot, like where I spend my time. Of course, crypto has been the cutting edge of finance and technology for the last 5 years. And then over the last 2, 3 years, AI has also just been a mainstay in conversation. So I feel like thanks to you and the last 15 minutes of this conversation, I have a different view towards how crypto can also make an impact on making a better future with AI. So I feel like not a lot of people talk about that, and not a lot of people, frankly, have the understanding that you do to actually grok all of this information. So it's super helpful to have that framework in my mind, at
Yeah.
least.
Maybe as a final point there, like I think this is maybe the big problem with crypto across the board is like we all spend way too much time on crypto Twitter and talking to other people in crypto. And like it's the same as like when you're building a startup, right? Like if you're building a startup and say you build a startup and you raise a bunch of money and you hire a team, but all you ever do is like talk to your own internal team and you never get out of the building and talk to any users, you're not going to build a useful product. It's just not going to happen. Like
Mhm.
I think that's kind of where crypto is right now, where we have built like a useful form of finance internally, and like clearly that's useful because there are existing like financial players that are jumping in to use it, right? But very, very, very few crypto people actually do anything outside of crypto, and I've talked to a ton of people who are like I do a lot of interviews and stuff like that, right, for work and whatever. And I always ask people like, what do you do and read in your free time? And there's a lot of people who are just like, well, I read XYZ like crypto blogs and I read all these things and I read white papers, whatever. And I'm like, okay, what else? Like, what else do you do that's not in crypto? And there's a lot of people that don't do anything that's not in crypto, right?
Yeah.
And like, you can't fall so far there. Like, falling down the rabbit hole and being obsessed with stuff is important and it's a good thing. But you can't fall so far down the rabbit hole that you completely lose perspective on what the rest of the world is, what is going on in the rest of the world, right? Because then you just don't know how to relate to people at all anymore. And I know a lot of people that are unfortunately like that in crypto. And I think the answer here is like if you want to you if you want to build something useful in crypto XAI, leave crypto for a bit. Like
Mhm.
just stop for like 6 months, go just do things in AI. Like go get a job in AI, go like build stuff with AI. Don't look at crypto at all. Don't even think about how it relates to crypto because it probably doesn't. Just go and do things, and like in the process of doing that, you'll discover a bunch of problems that you'll be like, wait, this is actually really similar to something we've already solved in crypto, or maybe this could be solved with a decentralized approach. Maybe not, right? But that's what I think people need to do. They need to get out of the house and actually like go join some of these other industries and like do things in these other industries, and remember, the fun times that we've had here, so
Yeah.
that eventually you're like, I know how to tie this back.
No, I totally agree. And I also totally agree with the point that people should read things outside of crypto. Like one of the best things that I've done over the last 6, 12 months is like just stop reading crypto things. Like one of my favorite things to do is just go on Substack and read random like essays by people I don't know, people I have no clue about, and just get like a better understanding of what the fuck is happening in the world. Like what are people talking about? And just read like AI blogs, because like if you look at the world of AI, we would think that these are AI companies, they would be promoting AI generated content or like AI generated stuff, but it's actually the total opposite. Like OpenAI does the most human content possible. Like that's their marketing thing. So it's just so important to expand your horizon and also just walk away from like what you do every day, because like you've been crypto pilled, but you're never going to solve or even see the problems if you don't have a wide enough scope.
Yeah. I mean, look, like giving myself as an example, right? Like I was feeling pretty like about it like a year ago or maybe even 6 months ago. I was sort of like, okay, well, I'm not really seeing what interesting things exist right now in crypto. Like there's a lot of the same stuff, and I do think that there's some really interesting stuff there, right? Like I do think like what's happening right now with intents and things like that is fundamentally interesting, but it's these are problems that we've been now thinking about for like I have been at least thinking about now for like 5 years, right? And so they're not
Mhm.
new things. They're things that are like coming to fruition after research that has been done. Um, and like just to explore, I started looking at other industries, and like just even in like 2 weeks of just playing around with building things with AI, I had like 10 plus ideas for like
Yeah.
different things that you could build with AI that actually would have like crypto components in them, right? Where you're like, oh, maybe it's not entirely in crypto, and maybe it's not like launching a token or whatever, but it relates like fundamentally, heuristically, ethos wise aligned with the way that we think about things in crypto. It was like, oh, you could decentralize this part of the stack and it would actually be better.
I mean, as a final takeaway, maybe like go touch grass and don't forget
Go
your
touch
crypto
grass.
roots.
Stop listening to this podcast. Go touch grass. Don't listen to any more crypto podcasts except for this one.
Yeah, yeah. Arjun, thanks a lot. I feel like this is one of the most interesting conversations I've had, because this was not just about Interop or not just about crypto. Like it actually ties in so many relevant things in this world. And it's really nice to like have your opinion on things, because I've probably told you this multiple times. Like I genuinely respect your opinion. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate getting the chance to talk about this stuff here because it's important, and there's not a lot of places where real conversations are happening about it. So
I
I
mean,
appreciate you having me
if
on.
if you if you want to have this conversation or any conversation again, like you know where to find me on Telegram.